Sweet Home is a horror RPG that was released in 1989 and didn't make it out of Japan until much later on, mostly once the internet came around or when people were importing games from Japan. It really was complicated to find a copy of this game unless you went online and looked for a fan translation of the ROM. After playing through this, I can kind of see why it didn't make it over to North America. At the time, Nintendo of America really did not like basically everything that was in this game. So, yeah, we weren't going to see it until much later on once fans started translating it, and I don't think it's actually gotten an official release since it was put out on the Famicom. Thankfully, you can find fan-translated ROMs, and you can play through the whole game, and it's definitely worth it. Sweet Home is a movie-based game. The movie was released in 1989 right alongside the video game, and to some extent, the game follows the plot of the movie. There were a few changes, the setup's a little bit different. You have to control all 5 characters, whereas in the movie, not all 5 of them are going to make it because it's a horror film and somebody's got to die. And there are a lot more frescoes in the game than there are in the actual movie. So right off the bat, you find out that the lady of the mansion is haunting it, and you don't really find out why right away, but it does get revealed as you go through this. You find a bunch of notes from other people who have gone into the mansion to try to stop what's happening. You find a few people that just happen to be here. For some weird reason, there are still servants in this mansion, and they don't appear to be spirits. It's a little weird, and it takes some pretty big liberties with the source material, but it's not anything too ridiculous. Some more differences between, the movie and the game. In the game, nobody gets possessed and goes out into the woods and digs up the child's body. None of your characters actually die. If they do die, then, the game is over. Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff, and sadly, my favorite character from the movie is only briefly in the game. And he has a different name as well. I'm not really sure if that was a translation error from the movie that I watched, but man, I was really missing the old dude showing up there and just being a badass. But he's not here. Yeah, whatever. There are a number of necessary changes that were made to this story. I don't really mind it because the movie's plot needed to be changed. After all, this is supposed to be a role-playing game. You need a party of characters to go through and do stuff, and you're going to need a whole bunch of puzzles in order to solve and everything else. The developers really did a good job of combining some genres that I didn't think would really go too well together, like survival horror and role-playing, but I'll get more into that in just a bit. I do really like the story of this game, and it's just a lot of fun to go through. I do wish a few things had been trimmed and a few other parts of the movie had made it in, but I understand why they had to change it. Even after playing through this, I'm not totally sure how I feel about the gameplay. It might be the ROM that I was using, but I'm not totally sure on whether I enjoyed everything in this game or not. The controls are a little complicated. It uses a menu system, kind of like Dragon Warrior and Phantasy Star. I don't really like those all that much. It makes some sense here. After going and finding a translated version of the manual, it makes a lot more sense. And then when I found a better guide to go through when I was playing this, I started liking a lot of the game mechanics more. When I first started playing it, I was just kind of like, I don't know about this. It just feels overly complicated and not all that great. And then when I came back to play it, after finding a better guide to use, I liked it a lot more. So at its core, this is a turn-based RPG, and it has a whole bunch of puzzles and items that you need to collect and, just need to solve, that sort of thing. Many of these puzzles rely on the tools that your characters have, and also you need to find the correct item and use that for the correct puzzle as well. Like when you've got fire that fills a room, you need to use the fire extinguisher. When you come to a certain area that is blocked off by some weird creepy shadows, you need to use the flashlight to get through it. When you come to an area that has ice on the floor, you need to use a pick. There are areas where you need to use a rope to swing across. And there's just a whole lot of stuff that you're going to need to pick up. There are key items that you need to have in your inventory. And yeah, it's one of the things that I didn't like too much is how much inventory management is required in this game. I understand why, but it just felt really annoying to go through an area, realize that, oh, I need a mallet to do this, and I drop the mallet somewhere in this maze of a mansion, and I have to go back and find it. Yeah, it was a little frustrating, especially when I started playing it. As I found other stuff and found out just how I was supposed to be doing things, it made a lot more sense. To give you another example, when I started playing this, I had no idea what the call command meant. I didn't really know when to use prayer and when not to. There was a bunch of strange things happening in this that I was just very unclear about. You also have the talk command right next to the team command, and if you click on the wrong one, you'll break your party up. So right away you're told to, team up so you can form a party of 2 and a party of 3. It really doesn't matter which characters are in your party. There's really nothing to honestly distinguish them. I didn't notice that one was stronger than the other. I didn't notice that one would break the wooden bridges more than the other. It just kind of felt like, okay, I want my vacuum along with my camera, so if I run into one of the frescoes that needs to be cleaned, I can do that and take a picture of it at the same time. Or if I need to explore an area where there's glass on the floor that I need to vacuum up, I'm going to want that character in my party, along with the character who has the key that can unlock the doors. It really felt like, just do whatever you want. It really isn't that big of a deal. When I got into combat, I realized, oh, I know what that call command is now. It's to call the other party to come and join you. So when I first started playing it, I was like, well, I'm going to have one party with 3 characters, and they're going to end up being stronger than the party with 2 because they're better at fighting. Then when I tried the call command, I was like, okay, I can bring all 5 together in one battle, and that kind of gives them all experience, lets them all level up at the same time, makes the battles easier. Okay, I got this. There was never a spot where I needed to grind for levels. It just felt like I was, going through things normally and progressing the way I was supposed to. So that was kind of fun. This isn't a game that really helps you out with grinding for levels. That's kind of not the point of this game. So I enjoyed that, just not having to do that here, because that would have been really frustrating, since your number of healing items is very limited. When I got to the end of the game, I felt like I was a bit overpowered, because I just wasn't noticing that my character's health was going down all that fast. And the final battle was pretty easy. A lot of that had to do with just me fighting every battle and running at very limited times. Most of the time I could get through a fight and not really have a problem with it, so that was kind of fun. So the few times that I did run in combat, those had to do with my party getting split up. So at times you'll find like these spirits flying across the screen. They're usually blue, and sometimes they fly straight across the screen, sometimes they kind of take weird patterns. And if you get hit by them, the spirit will abduct whatever party member it touches, and they'll get teleported to some weird part of the mansion. don't worry, it's pretty easy to figure out where they are because you can just go to the party option and select that character and figure out where they got transported to. And then you have to hopefully get them all the way back, or you can send your party to go find them. So at that point, you'd have a party of 2, or you'd have a party of 1, or something like that. You can just send your guys back to go get them and bring them back to wherever you were before. It does make the game a little bit frustrating at times, but it does help you level up, and it's, helps you stay together. That was the thing that I found the most useful while I was going through this, was just keeping my party together and doing everything in a way that, didn't mean I was in for a whole bunch of really complicated fights or anything like that. Once I really learned how to play the game, I liked the gameplay a lot more. It felt like they, managed to combine both role-playing and survival horror fairly well. I can definitely see this game being frustrating for some people. It was for me when I first started. But if you keep at it, you'll figure out what you need to do. And it is one of the better role-playing games that I've played, especially, from the late 80s. The graphics in Sweet Home are excellent, especially for 1989. This is one of the best looking games that I've played from that year. The game uses really an overhead perspective for most of this, where you're just wandering through the mansion and whatnot. It's going to look like a lot of other console RPGs that you've played. So, yeah, there's that. But all of the graphics look really creepy. Everything that you're walking through looks really run down. When it switches to the battle scenes, those look really cool. They do resemble something that you're going to see in, like a Dragon Quest game or a Phantasy Star game where it's just a first-person perspective. But the sprites look excellent. They're very well detailed, especially when you get later on in the game and you start fighting, better-looking enemies. The ghosts look really creepy. The ghouls look creepy. Everything in this game is designed to look very creepy because, hey, it's a horror game. It's supposed to. There are a few points early on where you need to use a candle in order to see your way through certain levels. I never really like it, but it is used well here, and it doesn't last too long. You manage to find the generator pretty quickly and turn the lights on, then you don't need the candles anymore. So that's great, and it clears up space in your inventory, so there's a plus. There are also little cutscenes in this game which really work wonderfully to tell the story. You have both in-game graphics being used, and there will also be little cutaways to a door opening or lightning crashing through a window, stuff like that. You also have at the end of the game a short cutscene which shows your characters running away. It's kind of just a reverse footage of what happens at the very beginning, where you see your characters moving up to the mansion. It is exactly what you would expect from a game from this period. It's not going to be anything elaborate, but it still looks very good. There was a lot of sprite flickering in this, and it got more noticeable the farther I went into the game, where there was just more happening on the screen. It wasn't too distracting, but it was very noticeable in some spots. I do think the battle screens look nice, but the attacks and also the prayer attack, the animation that they give you, isn't really very good. It's just a flash on the screen and then the text tells you what happens. I can kind of accept that because everything else in the game looks really good, so yeah, there is that. If you do play this game, though, there's a lot of flashing lights on the screen, just to warn you, especially when you get to the final battle where it just constantly flashes a different color and flashes something different. The graphics are very nice in this. I really love them. It gets very creepy in some spots, and I do like that they were able to take some scenes from the movie and kind of recreate them in some way. It's not going to look as good, but still, it looks really good for an NES game or a Famicom game. So I wanted to take a second to just talk about the ending, because I'm not really sure what to make of it, like what actually happens at the end of this game. I do really like the boss fight. It feels less like a role-playing game and more like an actual survival horror at this point. Because at no point did I feel like I was really in any danger of losing this fight. You're given clues on what you need to do, and throughout the course of this, you're supposed to collect 4 items that are going to be really important in defeating, or just banishing the ghost at the very end of this. And during the fight, you're given clues as to what item you're supposed to use. You're also told what order you need to put them in. That clue is fairly cryptic. The game, at least the translation that I have, acknowledges that it's a pretty cryptic clue. But once you get there and you read what she says, it kind of makes sense. Also, several of the guides explain this to you, so if you do get confused and you just end up in a loop of endlessly fighting her, then you check one of those and it'll tell you. Because you need to use an item at a specific point, and then it'll hurt her, which never really seems to matter, like what damage you're doing to her. It's very hard to explain. So you'll use the item, and then the next turn you need to use one of your prey attacks on her. And then she just moves on. There's more dialogue. Each of your characters will say something after they hit her, and then she'll say something at the end of that kind of round, and that will clue you into what item you need to use next. It's a weird boss fight, especially for a role-playing game, because it's not like you're fighting some ancient god or some emperor who's stolen godly power and is trying to rule the world. It's just this lady who's mentally broken because her child died, and then she went crazy and started murdering other children, and then killed herself and now haunts this mansion. So it's not like world-ending stakes are going on here. But yeah, it's a fairly anticlimactic fight, and it's a pretty big deviation from what happens in the movie to what happens in the video game. But there's a lot of necessary changes that had to take place for that. So you beat her, and then you release her spirit. She goes off to heaven and moves on. And then you run out of the building. And then there's a post-credit scene that I don't want to spoil for anybody. It's a weird ending to a game, and it felt like they were trying to set up for a sequel, but there is no sequel to this game. It just kind of stops. And then everyone's happy, and they move on, and I guess they made their documentary, which was kind of the whole point of them coming to this mansion to begin with. It's probably not the documentary that they wanted to make, but hey, here we are. So, yeah, that's kind of fun. It is a very fun game. I'm just not entirely sure how I feel about the ending of it. I've mentioned this a few times while I've been going over this, but there were some necessary changes from the movie to the game. The movie is a pretty standard ghost story where you have some characters that are just kind of there to die in gruesome ways. The game, does have each of them play a role, which is different. In the movie, that's just sort of like, okay, this person is, corpse number 1, and this person is corpse number 2, but they're all kind of quirky in their own way, and it's pretty fun to have them there. You even have the old man stereotype who's there to tell them that they're all doomed and they need to get away. And then he turns into a badass. It's really awesome. So the biggest thing that was different was just the reason why these people are trapped at the mansion. It starts off the same way. They're there to shoot a documentary on the frescoes that this famous painter had made. And then in the movie, their car gets crashed after one of their characters gets possessed. And she ends up digging up the grave, which starts this whole thing. They try to rebury the baby, but that just doesn't work. And then they have to deal with the fact that there is, a spirit in there. 2 of them get killed off, one of them gets abducted, another one disappears, and then it's all left to kind of the smart lady at the very end to wrap this whole thing up. And it kind of ends in the same way, where they give the child back to just the evil spirit, and then everything's sort of alright at the end. There's also only one painting in the movie. Like, it's a really big one, and it does just depict everything that had happened up to just when the family died off. So that was kind of different. I do like the fact that they had you go around and just, take camera shots and get clues to what happened here in the game, but in the movie it's just one big painting. And a lot of just what happened and the backstory is given to you in exposition. It's kind of a nice way of doing it, especially for a haunted house movie like this. It seems like most of the budget went into the end of it, and it looks really good. It is a very fun, just ghost story. I really like it quite a bit. I think they do a better job in the movie of kind of downplaying the whole prey mechanic, because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the game, and even in the movie it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but at least it's not used very often. It's kind of a quirky way of doing things, but it's one of those changes that you need to make. When I was watching this movie, I didn't get a whole lot of Resident Evil vibes. I got more like Silent Hill and Fatal Frame vibes. Mostly Silent Hill, but I can definitely see where they adapted some parts of Sweet Home to kind of inspire things in Resident Evil, especially with the first one where they're in a mansion, they've got a whole bunch of puzzles that you need to solve, and you need to do a lot of inventory management. Aside from that, just the movie is a pretty good horror movie on its own, and the game is pretty decent as well. Sweet Home is kind of a weird RPG to play through. It really isn't like anything else on the NES. I'm not sure if it's like anything else on the Famicom, but, I just haven't played that many Famicom games, and I don't really know if I'm all that interested in doing so. The two-party system in this is pretty cool. It's only popped up in really one other game that I can think of as being a major part of the gameplay. With Sweet Home, it's done a lot better than the other one that I played was Sea of Stars, and I think Sweet Home does a much better job of having a two-party system than that game did, because each party is actually doing shit, and they kind of matter more. There are parts of this game that I really, really enjoyed, but it took me a while to just get the hang of the whole control scheme and figure out what I was supposed to be doing. A lot of that is just with the language barrier and finding a guide that actually worked for me when I got stuck here. It's a very unique RPG. It's a really awesome horror concept. I love that. It's a really great licensed property game. It's pretty cool to go through and play something like this, and yeah, I'm really happy that it got translated. So anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.